It's Tuesday, January 3rd. Did the NFL's worst-case scenario just come true in front of our eyes? We start here. In an unprecedented moment, the NFL cancels a game when a player is given CPR on the 50-yard line.
This was not a routine situation. This was not a moment in which we just went to commercial break, came back, and went back to the game.
We'll get the latest on Damar Hamlin's condition and what it means for sports across the country. Kevin McCarthy's already moved his stuff into the Speaker's office, but does he have the votes to stay there?
McCarthy has been working overtime. He's already made some pretty big concessions.
Republicans prepare to select the next Speaker of the House. We'll take you inside back rooms as they grapple for power. And with dozens dead from winter storms, Buffalo residents describe the fear that they could have been next.
It's avoidable. It's devastating for everyone that's lost people.
Now they're asking local leaders, why didn't you do more to protect us? From ABC News, this is Start Here. I'm Brad Milkey. Last night was supposed to be a moment of holiday cheer for a city that badly needed it. In Buffalo, New York, a winter storm had wreaked havoc and caused dozens of deaths. We'll talk about that later in the show. And when you talk to people who lived through that, many of them said, hey, at least we'll get to enjoy a Buffalo Bills game on Monday. Well, last night on Monday Night Football in Cincinnati, Bills safety Damar Hamlin, a 24-year-old in his second year in the league, collapsed on the field. And it quickly became apparent this was not a quote-unquote regular football injury. There would be no thumbs up from Hamlin as he left the field. Instead, an ambulance drove on, and healthcare workers started providing CPR. As of this morning, Damar Hamlin is in critical condition at University of Cincinnati Hospital, and for the first time in the history of the league, a game was canceled because a player almost died on the field. Let's go to LZ Granderson. He's a sports journalist, he's an op-ed columnist for the LA Times, and he's an ABC News contributor. LZ, first off, can you just kind of describe what happened? Because players immediately kind of gathered in a way on the field to make sure a lot of us couldn't see all of what was happening.
Yeah, as you alluded to, this is, arguably the game of the season. Everyone, who are football fans knows this is a huge game, so we're all watching, and it looked like a routine play between the wide receiver and the safety.
To midfield and lowers the shoulder for 13.
And in fact, he popped right up immediately afterwards, right around the 50-yard line.
Now another Bills player is down.
But shortly thereafter, he began to wobble and then suddenly just collapse. And you weren't quite sure if he had just lost his breath, if he was just a little bit dizzy.
And then he got up and just went right back down to the ground.
Again, the hit did not look that egregious. We certainly have seen bigger hits this season alone, let alone over the course of many seasons in the NFL. And so that was the other aspect of it, Brad, that was kind of shocking, was that it just seemed so routine for the NFL.
It's not what any of us want to see, and everybody's around him, and we just hope that he's going to be okay.
So he collapses, and again, we're still in the mindset that this is sort of, nothing to be concerned with, because obviously it's a dangerous game, but we've seen this sort of scenario before where a player gets a little wobbly. That's why we have, concussion protocols now, and we just assumed that he would still be okay. It was only after we saw not just the response from the medical teams that was on the sideline, but actually the players themselves.
Several players are down on their knees. Other players are holding hands, praying. You can just see the worried looks on their faces.
And that's when you knew that this was not a routine situation. This was not a moment in which we just went to commercial break, came back, and went back to the game. This was way more significant than that. So significant that the players themselves from both sides, both teams, decided to form a shield so that cameras could not capture what was happening on the field.
That let me know there that this was not just another injury, that there were things going on behind that human wall that we shouldn't be seeing. They were trying to respect that young man's privacy, and rightfully so.
Everyone knows that, football is a dangerous game. But what we hadn't seen, certainly in more than 50 years anyway, is someone on the field receiving something that appears to be CPR, in which they weren't breathing, and that it wasn't just a quick moment of CPR. It actually lasted for a significant duration of time. And that's a lot of the reasons why players on both sides of the teams were so concerned, because they had not witnessed that either.
It's tough to watch, man. Because, man, we come together to play this game and to compete. And, the only rule we have, we want to walk off and go home to our families after the game, man. And And to see this young man there, man, that's tough.
And so as we as fans are processing this, whether at home or in the stadium, what's going on, the players themselves have never witnessed one of the brothers in their fraternity receiving CPR on the field because they stopped breathing.
Well, and LZ, everyone expected then, I think once they saw the ambulance and chest compressions, like you said, like that's the difference maker. I think everyone expected game's over, everyone go home. And yet players and fans kind of stuck around wondering what was happening for over an hour.
Yeah, a lot of the coverage, used the word unprecedented. It's not exactly unprecedented. There was a player who played for the Detroit Lions, as a matter of fact, who did dive after getting hit on the field.
That's a little unusual. The Lion hurt down there at the 16-yard line. He just collapsed and fell.
The interesting thing is that game actually continued.
We can only hope we'll get the word to you as soon as we find out just exactly what it is. But back into the action with 1 minute and 2 seconds left to play.
And that they actually played that game. And so there is, for what it's worth, give the NFL credit, even though it took an hour from which the game stopped to them actually, postponing the game. At least they postponed the game.
First of all, I've never seen anything like this. And then the question turns to, how do you, as a member of the Buffalo Bills or the Cincinnati Bengals, really continue on and want to play football?
So even though the NFL does deserve some credit for not doing what it had done a little bit more than 50 years ago, which is going to play the game, it was disappointing to hear the reports that they were giving the players 5 minutes to sort of process what they had just witnessed.
We're fans, but we're people first. And we just want to pray.
And not just the players, but everyone that was in the stadium and everyone who's watching at home or listening at home what was happening. So essentially, they were expecting NFL fans and the NFL community to sort of shake off witnessing or hearing about CPR being performed on this young man on the field for a significant period of time without us really knowing if he's alive or dead.
But to see them hugging each other, down on their knees, praying for him, his coach, the other team, their head coach.
And I think one of the things that was really interesting in terms of how it looked like it was playing out on television anyway, was that men just making decisions, pretty much in and of themselves. I'm going to weep. I'm not thinking about playing football.
The game doesn't matter. The game is so secondary to everything else. No one cares about the game right now. Everybody cares about this young man.
If there's anything to take away from that, Brad, that I think is a positive side, is seeing athletes of that level be able to feel comfortable making those decisions for themselves. Because as I mentioned earlier, when this took place, more than 50 years ago in Detroit in the NFL, those players were forced to go on and play that game. And today, those players individually and some perhaps collectively decided in real time, we're not doing this because we're not ready to process what we just witnessed.
Yeah, and the questions about that timing became really pointed really quickly. The NFL actually put out a statement saying they were in touch with the players' union to kind of decide about postponing the game. Biggest questions, obviously, right now, though, are about Hamlin's condition. So as we tape this, the information we've got is from the Bills organization directly, which says Hamlin suffered a cardiac arrest following that hit, that his heartbeat was restored on the field. That's important. And that then he was transported. He's currently sedated in critical condition, they say. But, LZ, at the end of the day, people, I think, have been wondering for years if we could see a player die on the field. So whether this was the moment or not, is this moment going to have an impact on the NFL or sports more broadly?
I don't want to take anything away from what we've all witnessed and what we're all still processing. But I personally have covered multiple stories in which young people have collapsed during games, during practices, for football, for basketball, for myriad of sports over my career. And when it comes to the question of whether or not we're going to see this happen on the field in the NFL, I think we're overlooking the fact that we've seen it happen in American society quite often, and we've decided for whatever reasons we're okay with it.
Big moment here, for the league and for sports really in this country in general. LZ Granderson, host of the ABC podcast Life Out Loud with LZ Granderson. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Welcome to the first day of 2023 that is not a federal holiday, meaning back to work for everyone. And that includes the first day of work for the 118th Congress. At this point, you probably remember the score from the midterms, right? Democrats did retain control of the Senate. In fact, they gained a seat. But over in the House, Republicans eked out a narrow victory. Well, ever since that moment, Republicans have been asked, who's going to be Speaker of the House?
The number one thing I'm going to do as a leader is I'm going to listen to all voices in the conference.
If you're going to change it, then you can't keep using the same people who kind of got you there.
The broken rules of the House of Representatives are not a bug of the system. They are a feature of the system.
Well, now, just hours before members sit down and vote for the third highest ranking person in government, it remains unclear who will get this job. There has been cajoling, there has been backstabbing. Let's take you straight to a buzzing Capitol building where ABC's congressional correspondent Rachel Scott is standing by. Rachel, how is this going to work today?
Well, Brad, it's supposed to be a day of excitement. Republicans have a narrow majority in the House. They're supposed to elect their brand new Speaker of the House, and then we're supposed to see the 118th Congress be sworn in. But what would be Congress without a little chaos and a little bit of drama, Brad?
Well, and the thing I always love to remember is the Speaker can technically be anyone, but let's face it, I mean, it's going to be a lawmaker, right? You'd expect. And looking at the math, if Republicans can just win this with a bare majority, you'd expect them to elect one of their own. Kevin McCarthy, the highest ranking Republican, seems like he's supposed to be the lock. Why would it not be him?
And that is probably what Kevin McCarthy is asking himself this morning as we are speaking, Brad, because time is essentially running out for him.
McCarthy, do you have the votes for Speaker locked in tomorrow?
I think we're going to have a good day tomorrow.
At this point, he is still struggling with just hours to go. He's already moved into the Speaker's office, but he doesn't have enough votes to be elected for the position.
Are you prepared to make more concessions in exchange for more support?
I hope you all have a very nice New Year's.
I mean, look, this is the reality of just having a very thin majority in the House. Every single vote is going to matter. So if every member is voting and is present, he can only afford to lose 4 votes. The problem for McCarthy is right now, 5 Republicans say that they will definitely vote against him. And he's not out of the woods just yet, because in the final hours, another 9 Republicans said that they are on the fence. So do the little math here. You add that together. That's 14 Republicans that could vote against him. Remember, he could only afford to lose 4 votes. So this is far from what he needs at this point.
And all the no's you're talking about, Rachel, these are all like members of the House Freedom Caucus, right? Like significantly further to the right compared to McCarthy. But I mean, what is their beef with him exactly?
Well, Brad, look, this all really just comes down to being a trust issue. You have some Republicans who just want new leadership.
No, I won't be voting for Kevin McCarthy tomorrow.
For example, Bob Good, part of that Never McCarthy group, well, he told Fox News that McCarthy doesn't stand a chance.
And there's many Republicans within our conference who are privately acknowledging they know he doesn't have the votes. They know that he's not a trustworthy leader. They know he's not a real conservative. And they're ready to vote against him once we put forth a true challenge candidate.
And McCarthy has been working overtime. He's already made some pretty big concessions.
No longer is all the power going to rest the way Nancy had it.
He's actually made it easier to fire him if he were to be elected as the next Speaker of the House. He's changed the threshold so only 5 Republicans could force him out. He's also met the demands of some really conservative members of the party who have complained about not having enough time to read these massive pieces of legislation. So he's now allowing 72 hours to read bills before they go to the floor.
Bills will actually go through committees. They will be debated before they come to the floor, and people will actually have a say.
He's going to remove the magnetometers, which went up right after January 6th. He's going to cut off proxy voting, which will require all members to vote in person.
Oh, so it's like that nitty-gritty. Is that specific what they're asking for?
Oh, yeah. Even select committees to investigate the origins of COVID-19, investigate the DOJ, the FBI. And his allies have even called at least one moderate Democrat to try to convince them. But still, at the end of the day, Brad, that's just not enough.
But so then, Rachel, okay, let's say he does not get the vote. Let's say he doesn't clear a majority. Can anyone else get a majority? Like, what happens if he doesn't clear that 50% threshold?
Well, Brad, buckle up. So basically, if McCarthy doesn't get the votes on the first ballot, the House is literally just going to keep voting. I mean, the House cannot move on with any other business. No bills, no legislation, no working for the American people. They can't even be sworn into Congress yet until there is a Speaker of the House. So if McCarthy fails on the first vote, it's going to go to another vote and another one and another one. I feel like I sound like DJ Khaled right now, but it will just keep going on. And that is something that has not happened in 100 years.
Did you make a decision on whether you're going to be supporting McCarthy for Speaker tomorrow?
I'm
Do you think there's still 5 no votes at least?
Yes.
And even Matt Gaetz, who was voting against McCarthy, he's warning that we may see the cherry blossoms bloom in Washington, D.C. before we see a Speaker of the House that is elected.
Is there another person, Rachel, or does it just is there another viable alternative to McCarthy?
All eyes would certainly turn to the number 2 in leadership, Steve Scalise. Right now, Scalise is not campaigning to be the next Speaker of the House.
Have you been approached about being the next Speaker if McCarthy can't get it done? And what do you say to those people that don't want to vote for him?
Yeah, no, look, I support Kevin, and I think there's still a lot of conversations that are going on.
But some Republicans that are voting against McCarthy have privately indicated that they would support Scalise, Brad.
Fascinating moment here. And you can imagine Democrats aren't going to vote for any of these people. They're just going to say, yeah, Republicans, you guys can just keep sort of living in this mess that you're creating for yourselves unless you want to vote in Nancy Pelosi. All right, Rachel Scott, thank you so much.
Thanks, Brad.
I want to go back to Buffalo for a second, because not only was that NFL game that we talked about very scary, well, in the last week, because of the huge storm that whipped into the Buffalo area, dozens of people died.
Maybe the worst storm in recorded history since these storms have been tracked.
That storm is still affecting people, too, both in a practical sense because of this huge amount of ice and snow that's flooding roads as it melts, but also because on a more basic level, you now have a city full of people who basically all lived through this traumatic, deadly event. We got a couple of them with us right now. Samantha Pierce and Danielle Silver are sisters from Buffalo. They join us now. And you guys were both in town as the storm came in, right? Samantha, you were visiting family. Danielle, you live there all year round.
Yeah, everyone lives here, all my whole family, except for Sam, really.
Right, okay. So then take me back to the 23rd, I guess. When did you realize it was starting to get bad?
So my job ended up making the decision to close probably about 9:30. And when I left, it was pretty bad. My first stop was to get my middle child for my sister, Sam. And the roads were okay. Like they're at that point, they were still manageable. And then I had to pick up the younger two because I knew that if I didn't get the kids, they weren't going to be spending Christmas.
Oh, right. You're like, we're about to be snowed in somewhere, wherever we are.
Yeah. So I was hoping to get to them before it got too bad. So I was really happy that my job ended up making that decision to close. Making my way to my mom's house was also slow but manageable. It was leaving there that was really bad. When I left there, you really couldn't see much. My mom sent me on my way with cover blankets and water bottles, doing the mom thing she does. I pulled over multiple times because I'm like, I can't see anything in front of me at this point. That's why I had to pull over. I'm like, I don't know how close I am to the curb. I don't know where exactly I pulled over. I pulled over the best that I could. I knew I was on the right side lane, so I'm closest to the curb, but I didn't know exactly where. I didn't know who was coming behind me, who was in front of me.
For those of you who don't understand what it was like, think about looking just a few feet in front of you at a sheet of white for more than 24 hours in a row.
It was scary. I was really nervous about getting hit and trying to make it home and being stuck there.
Wow. And so, Samantha, what's happening to you at that time?
So I thought I was in good shape on the first day. When I come to Buffalo, I rent from an apartment building down here with lots of other apartments. It has covered parking. So I was actually feeling pretty good Friday morning going into the storm. I picked up a few groceries. I was ready to hunker down for a day or two. And it wasn't until sometime in the afternoon that I realized that the heat had gone out. It was getting cold in the apartment. At that point, it was already maybe 57 degrees when I realized that the heat had gone out on Friday and that there was partial power in the building, but it seemed like generator power. I have 2 dogs. Trying to take them out was just pretty treacherous. They could barely see. They didn't want to be outside. So Saturday on Christmas Eve, it was about 44 degrees in the apartment.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And then I had a ton of blankets. I was on my couch with every single blanket I had in the apartment on me. You pretty much bundled up as if you were outside.
Please do not drive in the city of Buffalo.
And people are running out of food, too. That's the other thing, throughout this driving ban, because everybody was told to, prepare for 1 or 2 days, have 2 to 3 days of food on hand. And so that's what a lot of people had. And so it's day 5 and people are still, unable to get out of their homes. Grocery stores are still closed. So, it started to look up by like day 5, day 6. But I think the anger is still there for a lot of people. One of my closest friends in town, her family also was without heat and power. And, I think we're all still sort of like still coming down from those feelings.
Yeah, let's talk about kind of what could have been done differently, because state officials have basically described this as kind of, it's a once-in-a-lifetime storm. Like, what are you going to do? Like, it's very scary. Bad things have happened during storms, and bad things happened here. But their basic line is this was difficult to avoid any other scenario. Is that the case from your perspective?
No. I think at the very least, an earlier travel ban would have saved a lot of people, like my sister, from having to go to work that morning and then also rushing home during rush hour traffic.
It is ugly right now on many of the streets. The driving ban is still in effect for the city of Buffalo.
Until the travel ban was enacted, a lot of companies stayed open. So it was because of the travel ban that a lot of companies made the decision whether or not to close. Schools were closed. So, you've got people like my sister who, in addition to having to report to work that morning and now having to leave during rush hour traffic to get home in this storm, have to go pick up their children who weren't at school and needed childcare. So a travel ban would have been, I think, one of the easiest ways to save lives, because it would have kept a lot of people off the road who got stuck trying to make it home.
When snow is falling at 4, 3, 5 inches an hour, you can't keep up with it. Nobody can. That's Mother Nature. So people need to understand that.
And then I think the other piece for me that is very frustrating is hearing, our mayor say that the city isn't prepared to deal with snowfall, anything outside of the normal snowfall. And he's been mayor for 17 years. And that's really confusing, because I just don't understand how we don't have an emergency response plan for snowfall.
We would walk by, it was abandoned cars everywhere. We would walk by a car that looked dead and we would see the lights turn on and them try to get out one more time. They probably have no other options, Some of those people that we walked by might have died that night.
People were saving themselves. There's a Facebook group that had, I think, 68,000 people in it, and people were literally having to save themselves, and it'll be reframed as Buffalo Strong and, the city of good neighbors, but we shouldn't have had to save ourselves. And so many people did, because there was a lack of planning across the whole government.
Danielle, is that how you see it as well?
Completely agree. But now I will say this isn't the first. Like, we just had a 6-foot snowstorm last month. I mean, don't get me wrong. The winds and the visibility are what really made this so treacherous. But we get snow. This isn't unusual.
Oh, like once in a lifetime is kind of overselling it from your perspective, then.
Yeah. And I remember I'm 35. I've been here my whole entire life. We've had snowstorms. We've had school buses stranded. So yes, I guess the schools being closed is an upgrade, but we've had people stranded places in snowstorms. This is not completely new. Yes, it's not an every year, every season thing, but it's not new. It's avoidable. It's devastating for everyone that's lost people. For our whole community. It's insanely horrible. I don't even have good words for it, honestly.
Yeah, you guys were clearly not the only residents who were just horrified by this. The county commissioner, who lives in Buffalo, initially said he thought Mayor Brown should resign over this. He now says his emotions got the better of him. Brown, for his part, says he does not plan to resign, but it is becoming clear just how a matter of hours turned into a real life and death situation. Samantha, Danielle, glad you guys are safe. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you, Brad.
And one last thing. The Buffalo blizzard sprung out of what nowadays we call a balm cyclone. But on the West Coast, there's another weather event that's quickly making itself part of the common lexicon, an atmospheric river.
The Bay Area is cleaning up and drying out today after the New Year's Eve storm dumped near historic amounts of rain.
Floods in California just won't seem to let up. At this point, the amount of water saturating the land is leading to mudslides.
We rescued dozens of people over the last 24 hours from the rooftop of their vehicle or from the bed of their pickup truck.
So how is this much water even making its way into the sky in the first place? Well, that's an atmospheric river. Think of it like this. In Finding Nemo, you got that turtle introducing Nemo to the East Australian Current that goes super duper fast.
Listen, I need to get to the East Australian Current. EAC.
Oh, dude. You're riding it, dude.
Now, imagine if a pipeline like that was over our heads, high in the sky, rapidly transporting moisture from the tropics, faster than any cloud could carry it, in the form of water vapor. And the first time I heard this, I was like, oh, water vapor? Like, that sounds weak. How could that cause a flood? But the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration says the amount of water coursing through these air rivers is the same you would see at the mouth of the mighty Mississippi. And when it all makes landfall, that vapor becomes rain and snow. Atmospheric rivers are temporary weather systems. They spring up and they go away. But these ones in California have remained in place longer than most. And after the term was coined in 1994, they become more and more common. If you're wondering, by the way, whether these can help with California's record drought, experts say it actually harms more than it helps. They'd prefer a few more babbling brooks to a whitewater rafting trip in the sky. By the way, I should mention, Samantha from Buffalo, whose voice you heard earlier describing her experience, she reached out to us because she listens to Start Here every morning, which reminds me, if you ever have a news tip, if you're on hand for something extraordinary, hit me up on Twitter at @TheBradMilky. You can DM me, and of course, always at our Twitter home, Start Here ABC. I'm Brad Milkey. See you tomorrow.
America's #1 news source comes the all-new ABC News app. Breaking news, incredible video, faster, smarter, and it can customize to you and your interests. If you love being in the know, you're gonna love this. Experience what all the buzz is about. Experience the all-new ABC News app. Download it now. With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight.